Hello, welcome to my new video series on Abba's albums. I'm going to be reviewing all of their albums in order, track by track, and applying my own tried and tested marking method to grade every song and therefore working out an average score per track for each album. Now, those of you who followed my reviews before will know that I'm a huge fan of Elton John, and I've been working through his many studio albums. But with Abba, we've only got 8 albums to consider at the moment, of course. There is a new one coming up very excitingly within the next few weeks, and of course, we've heard a couple of tracks from that. Believe it or not, I started planning this project before any news came out about Abba getting back together. So it's an exciting project, and we're starting right at the beginning back in 1973. Now, I'm not going to bore you with a lot of Wikipedia information about Abba because I'm sure we all know lots about them and about their individual skills. All I will say is that I'm going to be looking at the 8 studio albums. There's lots of other material about as well, a couple of live ones, 7 compilations, 3 box sets, 51 singles. There's an awful lot out there. Now, their first album came in 1973. It was this one, Ring Ring, just a few months after they formed in 1972. Now, over here in the UK, Abba has become a little bit of a joke. That's partly due to the comedian Alan Partridge naming his comedy show Knowing Me, Knowing You, and kind of making fun in a gentle way of the Abba tracks. But I think in a way, Abba has withstood that, and people have realised that their music is highly skilled. And that for that reason, it's greatly popular. So we're tracing back to that first album. And we must remember that this was the first outing for this group, and our hopes should not be too high when we listen to this album. Now, it was produced by Benny and Bjorn, and it's kind of a mixture of singles, B-sides, revamps, and fairly simple, catchy melodies. There's rather a sort of naive peace and love for all message about a lot of it. And one of the things I picked up in this, which you may find on some of the songs, is that it's men writing about what women are thinking, or rather it's men writing about what they think women might be thinking. And that reflects in some of the lyrics, which you may find a little unpalatable these days. Nevertheless, we view it as of its time. This is written, nearly 50 years ago. Can you believe that? Well, I can remember as a youngster all of these songs coming out. I can remember how popular they were. I can remember my brother buying most of the albums. Unfortunately, they're still stuck in his loft. But nevertheless, I'm buying the CDs and hopefully going to pick up some vinyl as well and listening to them all one after the other. So let's get into the detail. Now, regular viewers of mine will know I always have a look at the booklet first, and actually pretty presentable cover to Ring Ring. The photographs in the booklet are actually pretty good. There's a good one of the 4 of them out on a sailing boat. That, as you can see, is a little bit dated, going with the ring idea. You know, we've got to bear in mind these are the fashions of the 70s. And in some ways, they were setting the fashions of the 70s, weren't they? But they look happy. There's a little Christmas one there. In this booklet, the lyrics are presented in absolutely tiny writing. I mean, I was looking for some sort of magnifying glass to read some of them. There's a nice one with some of their musicians. There's a couple with their dog. That's a lovely picture as well, isn't it? There they are, perhaps preparing for their boat journey. So it's actually a pretty good booklet, this one. There's a bit of fun in the kitchen, and there's the 4 of them performing. Track number 1 is the title track, Ring Ring, written by Bjorn and Benny, with English lyrics by Neil Sedaka, interestingly. This was their first effort at a Eurovision entry, which got into the Swedish heat, but was not very successful, rather surprisingly. What we hear are glam rock signs starting to appear in their music. A lover is waiting by the phone for a call. And I sit all alone impatiently. Won't you please understand the need in me? There are just the earliest indications here of their ability to write an anthem that is memorable with a hook that people can remember. Just hear an extract. That's familiar to all of us, isn't it? It may not be their greatest song ever, but it's one that is still recognisable almost 50 years later. So as an opening to their very first album, we are going to mark this one with, well, it's a fairly good track to start with, 5 out of 10. Track 2 is Another Town, Another Train. So this time we have a male vocal here with backing from the female singers. A bit of an odd story, this one. This man is telling that he's had a relationship with a woman. He's always told her that he'd have to move on, and now he decides to. Well, why? What's so wrong about the relationship as it is if it was going so well? He seems to be a bit of a shallow drifter who doesn't seem to care much about women, and he's on his way. So not much of a feminist message in this one. The refrain itself is fairly pleasant. It reminds me a little bit of the New Seekers, or the Seekers. Remember that folk group from the 1970s? This sort of refrain. It's not especially exciting, but it's quite pleasant, and maybe just a hint of that greatness to come in terms of being able to write catchy melodies. So lyrics not bad. The actual melody is okay, though. I think we'd call this an average ABBA track, and we're going to give it 4 out of 10. Number 3 is called Disillusion. Agneta's only lyrics on the album, and she takes the lead vocal as well. But the plight of women doesn't get any better here, because this is a poor woman who seems to have been abandoned by her man. It's a heartfelt vocal, and it's a fairly pleasant song, this one. The vocal cuts through quite nicely, and there's a second female vocal on the second verse, filling in the harmonies quite well. The production is fairly thin, and we could perhaps do with a little bit more emotion in what sounds almost like a show song, this one, about this relationship going wrong. It's the man in charge again, isn't it? He's left this woman. How can I forget you when my world is breaking down, she sings. Let's just hear that refrain. Quite pleasant, isn't it, that one? And I think maybe that could be reworked later on. Anyway, I'm going to give this one, say it's a fairly average track for ABBA. We know what's coming later, lots of high scores, but at the moment we're going to give that 4 out of 10. Okay, track number 4. Now let's just tick off those things that you need. Hope, yes. Love, yes. Faith, yes. Okay, once you've got all those, you've got it all, because people need love. Now this sounds like another Eurovision entry song. It's certainly got a powerful sing-along message, and the simple hook on the refrain is actually quite difficult to get out of your head. So they're certainly succeeding in writing these memorable refrains. The question is the kind of the rest of the song up to it? Is the production up to it? Well, not yet, but there are little hints of it, and that's what's really interesting about this album, I think. Everybody knows that a man who's feeling down wants some female sympathy. Well, again, that appears to be the male point of view coming through here again. You know, who can argue with the fact that people need love? But we might argue with some of the detail of these lyrics. Anyway, it's a pleasant enough song again. It's fairly average. We're going to leave that 4 out of 10. Oh, and here's a bit of it. It's very loud, by the way. People need hope, people need loving, people need trust from a fellow man. Okay, so it's all in there, isn't it? And that's our message for the world. Right, let's move on to track number 5, which is I Saw It in the Mirror. Well, finally on this track, it's the men who are having a bit of trouble, because they've found out they're no longer needed. They've realised it in the face of their partner. Anyone can take my place. This is a male vocal lead. It's very slow. It's rather unexciting. It's a basic melody, almost a nursery rhyme, actually. As you can see, it's not especially exciting. This isn't Dancing Queen, is it? But again, this is an interesting deep cut for dedicated ABBA fans. I think the most we can say is that this is a below average track and give it 3 marks out of 10. The last track on side 1 is Nina Pretty Ballerina. This starts with some atmospheric train sounds. It's a story song about a woman with a secret. She appears to lead a normal life, but at the weekends she's queen of the dance floor. Now, where have we heard that message before? Or later, really, it's in Dancing Queen, of course. So this is kind of a forerunner of that type of story. There's some fake crowd noises on here, a little bit like Benny and the Jets, actually, from Elton John. And the refrain, of course, is pretty strong. Let's hear it. There's the crowd. Now, what we're hearing there, do you notice that? It's the female voices working together, perhaps double tracked possibly, to create the very beginnings of that unique ABBA sound. You probably know more about this than me. I'm coming to this album for the very first time. I've listened to the tracks a few times, and that for me on this album is the first indication that there's something special and, dare I say, unique about this sound. Anyway, this one I'm going to say is a fairly good song. Remember, early days, I'm going to give it 5 out of 10. So that's the end of side 1. You get 6 tracks on there, and my total mark for that is 25, which is a little bit on the low side for a lot of my album reviews, but we've got to remember these are very early days. Imagine what these scores are going to be by the time we get to the later albums. Well, track 7, Love Isn't Easy, but it sure is hard enough. I don't know whether there's any second meaning involved in that. This is kind of a country sort of start to this song. It's partly really an argument or a discussion between a male and female about how their relationship is going. The woman is a little bit fed up here. The man seems to be a little bit fed up as well. And they kind of agree to compromise on this. The accompaniment is rather jerky, but we do see their voices working quite well together. And there's again a kind of a Eurovision feel about this one. So you've got to have patience in a relationship. Well, I'm sure we'd all agree with that. A lot of messages coming out in these songs, aren't there? This one is all a bit bland, isn't it? And I think we're going to give this a below average and say 3 out of 10. Track number 8 is Me and Bobby and Bobby's Brother. Frida takes a solo in this with lyrics by Benny. This is a nostalgic look back at happy childhood days. It's a little bit on the twee side. And again, the lyrics are not exactly a sort of woman's point of view. Basically, she's singing that, well, I didn't like it, but that was my problem. It wasn't your problem. It was all my fault. The accompaniment is perhaps not the most pleasant on the ears. The refrain is quite attractive, actually, but it's all a little bit twee. And we're going to say again, this is a below average one for 3 out of 10. Track number 8 is Here's Your Brother. Now listen to the very start of this. Where have you heard that before? I probably don't need to say that we've heard that on Dancing Queen. So again, another little hint of things to come there. Now, I've been reading this book here by Robert Scott, which I do recommend. It's very interesting, taking each track in turn. He's not keen on this track at all because he says it sounds like it was recorded in a cement mixer. Well, I don't really think it's quite that bad, really. But anyway, this is a male vocal lead here, and it's about kind of a fighter, his empty life, and there's a peace and love message, of course, as well. The vocals on the refrain bring the whole ensemble together and are really quite good and quite catchy. And I would say the vocals on this track are superior to the rest of the album, or they may be too far back in the mix. Some of the instrumental accompaniment is a little bit dodgy for me. Well, maybe this could have been recorded later on and improved upon. Let's just hear a little bit of it, though. As you can see, that's the verse. Let's go on to the refrain. Go with the refrain. Now that is very much the ABBA sound, almost fully complete there. Pretty glorious actually, and I do like this refrain. It's an enjoyable song. Some of the lyrics may be a little bit questionable maybe, but I think this is possibly the best track on the album. I'm still only going to say it's fairly good because of what's to come, but I'm going to give this one 5 out of 10. Track 10 is She's My Kind of Girl. Now, the females don't make an appearance on this track. This was their first single. It's in a minor key with Benny and Bjorn on the vocals. There's kind of a sub-Beatles 1960s feel about the whole thing here, and it does sound very much like a B-side. It's about a man in love with a woman. She makes him feel good. She's my kind of girl, and if she ever leaves me, what could I do? Well, a fairly simple message, but this is quite a basic and exciting track. A little bit of a filler on the album, I would have said, and we're going to give this one a disappointing 2 out of 10. Now, track number 11 is I Am Just a Girl. I'm not a man, I'm just a girl, with nothing much to say. A bit of a negative message, this one. I don't think this is going to be a feminist anthem. We're not going to have Aretha Franklin singing this, are we? Or Annie Lennox. So again, this is of its time. It was written originally for a movie, apparently. Rather a sickly sort of 1940s style song, this. I can imagine there used to be a group in England called the Black and White Minstrels, very popular in the early 70s, kind of a sing-along, swing-along sort of group. And you can imagine them singing this. I am just a girl, one among the others, nothing much to say. Okay, well, it's all about how wonderful men are, and you just wonder why the actual females in the group agreed to sing this track. I suppose it was early days, but it's pretty awful, this one. I've got to say, unfortunately, we've got to give this one just 1 mark out of 10. The final track is Rock and Roll Band, and this has got an exciting guitar-led intro, and it's a fairly heavy track compared with the rest of them on the album. It's another male vocal, and it's another song about the female figures looking rather pathetic. It starts, she was looking so sad and lonely. She then gives a look to the man. He takes charge. He gets his guitar out, or he whisks her away to a dance. They dance to the rock and roll band, and everything's fine. Well, thank goodness we've got all these men helping the women out here. So again, we've got to look at this through the lens of 50 years ago. Things were a bit different there. And I don't really think we'd get away with this kind of message now, would we? But it is a reasonably good tune, fairly pleasant to listen to without being anything exciting. And as a closer, we're going to say it's a below average song, but it gets 3 marks out of 10. Now, I don't want you to think about my marking that I don't like ABBA, because I think they're absolutely fantastic, but I just think there's better things to come, aren't there? So on that second side, we had a total of 17 marks. Total marks for the album then, as the vinyl came out, was 42. For 12 tracks, that gives us an average of 3.5 marks per track. Now, obviously, these are early days, and we're going to see those scores go up considerably. And I want to leave room in my marking system for some of those fantastic later tracks. Now, there are a couple of bonus tracks still. In fact, there's 3 more to do. I'm going to deal with those in a separate video, along with your comments. So I'd like you to tell me your favourite track on this album, whether you agree with my assessments, and what you think overall about this album as a starter. What I do with these reviews is I enter all my marks onto a spreadsheet. I then, as we go through, gradually get an idea of all of the ABBA tracks in order, from my favourites down to the lowly marked ones. And I'm also able to compare albums against albums, and we will end up with a top 8 or even a top 9 of their studio albums in my favourite order. Of course, these are only my marks. You may have completely different marks, and I welcome your comments either way. So thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you want more about ABBA or Elton John, and I'll see you next time. Hello, welcome back to my channel, and many of you will know me from my Elton John album reviews. It's a project I started about 6 months ago to review all of his studio albums and grade every track out of 10. Now, I'm continuing with that, of course, and I've been overwhelmed by your response and your comments and feedback from all over the world. But I'm starting a new series. I'm going to be reviewing all of Abba's albums in order and grading every track out of 10 according to my tried and tested method. And this is it. Tracks can range from terrible to out of this world. And by consistently applying this to every track, I can compare albums within the same artist and albums from different artists. Just how good are they by working out an average mark per track. Now you may be saying, why is he bothering with Abba? Is it just because they've reformed with their new project? Well, I've got to say I actually started planning this well before any news came out that they were reforming. I'm interested in why they're so popular, what was so special about them, and why is their music still loved throughout the world so many decades on from when they formed. So I'm going to be looking, as I say, in order at their recordings from their very first album, seeing how that music develops and what made it so successful. So if you want to subscribe, please do so. I'll be posting a video about once a week, and I'll also be commenting on the feedback I get from you about your favourite songs. So please subscribe if you want to, and on to my first video.